Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 220, Corporate Wellness and Creating Your Best Workday with Paul Boston.
In today's episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talked to Paul Boston about the concerns and progressions around corporate wellness. Mental health is a big issue, and it's being spoken about more and more here in Canada. But not only that, corporate leaders are being proactive, and they're doing all that they can to keep their employees' minds healthy, ready for change, and of course, being more productive. One of the most interesting items that we discussed was the difference between work-life balance and work-life blending. So whether you're just entering the workforce, have been there for years, or actively climbing the corporate ladder, there's some really great takeaways that will help you excel in your own life.
Paul Boston is the president of Actus Performance Inc., a human performance development firm. Paul started his professional career working in the fast-paced and demanding world of marketing and advertising with Fortune 500 companies around the globe. At the same time, he started racing at the elite level of triathlons, and that's where we first met, actually. And he actually qualified 4 times for the World Triathlon Championships and started to discover performance similarities between his athletic and professional career. He then went back to school to study adult training and development, specializing in workplace performance. As an organizational performance development strategist, Paul works with clients to help them understand the fundamental performance values, attitudes, and skills people, teams, and organizations need in our ever-changing modern-day work world. Paul has published numerous articles and spoken to professional organizations across North America on 21st century workplace performance.
We're so excited to announce that we'll be attending and will be one of the title sponsors for Love Wild, Live Free vegan social events and Universe of Ali's 3rd annual Halloween charity event. This is a Wizard of Oz themed event, and it will be benefiting Storybook Farm Primate Sanctuary located in Sunderland, Ontario.
The Storybook Farm Primate Sanctuary does important and necessary work by providing a permanent home for primates retiring from biomedical research, zoos, universities, and private residences, as well as advocating for the well-being of exotic animals through education, offering freedom from fear. Storybook is a place of healing and recovery from trauma to such animals as Darwin, the IKEA monkey, and Pockets Warhol, an acclaimed painter.
That's right. Those are some of the animals that you may have seen in social media over the years. They house them there.
Pretty crazy stuff. Anyway, the event that we'll be attending is Saturday, October 21st. It starts at 8 p.m. at the Armour Heights Officers Mess in Toronto. So if you're in Toronto, definitely get to this event. We'd love to see you there. We'll put a link in our show notes so you can buy your tickets. It's going to be an awesome night.
See you there.
And now for a moment of gratitude.
Recently, I've started journaling at night again, and it's really been helping me sleep better. It's helping me wake up better, and it's really helping me feel more confident overall.
I'm so grateful for all the new listeners that we've received lately. There's been so many people reaching out to us, and here's something that I wanted to mention is that if you're listening to our show, first off, thank you so much. But secondly, if there's something you want to hear or someone you want us to interview or a topic you want us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. And you can hit us up on any of our social media, send us a message, you could email us. There's so many ways to contact us so that we could tailor this show to the audience that we have. And it would just be great to be able to continue to grow this show. And I know, we both know that we can't do it without your help. So thank you all so very much for everything that you're doing.
Paul Boston, thank you so much for being a guest on the Plant Trainers Podcast today. How are you?
Excellent. How are you guys?
We're good. We're great. We're very excited for today's topic. It's something that I've been thinking about and dealing with and inspiring people for the last little while. So I'm very excited to talk about the corporate world a little bit with you today. But before we get into that, do you have anything that you're grateful for that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, one thing I'm grateful for are all the clients I get to work with. I have the privilege to go into some big organizations and companies in Toronto area, and it's amazing the participants for my workshops, the stories they share with me, and the experiences they share with me really enhance kind of my overall knowledge of workplace wellness, but wellness in general, more from a humanistic standpoint. So yeah, it's always learning from my clients.
We think that's great. And, it's kind of interesting because you've met Adam before in a couple of different areas, either in person or in other areas. And we bumped into you at the Toronto Veg Food Fest, which is amazing. And now you're such an expert in this area. And you're also an avid listener of the show. So it's kind of fun having you on today and having you on this side of the microphone instead of on that side of the earbuds.
Yeah, it's great to be on. I mentioned to Adam, I guess, at the Toronto Vegan Show that I was always on and off with plant-based diets as an athlete. We always eat more for performance. And I did an ultra. It went okay this year. But I said to Adam at the show, yeah, I'm starting to date veganism. So, we're just going on. And then ever since then, I think I was just into week one of kind of just going, okay, completely plant-based. And here we're, beginning of October. I'm still in that path. So I never went back after our conversation.
And so I assume you're feeling pretty good that way, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I probably didn't go through the big change somebody would go through, say they're strictly, because I haven't eaten like meat in over 15 years, seafood, fish, a bit of poultry, but I've always eaten clean. But what I did notice was just the overall how my body felt after a workout. It just didn't feel as run down, and the ramp up time to gain back up to 100% is much faster.
Yeah, I always find it interesting that people are quick to talk about the lifestyle, but they don't really understand it until they actually go through it themselves. And when they start to see the benefits themselves, that's when they like a light bulb goes off. Like, oh, now I understand what he was talking about. My body just picks up and recovers and I can go again. And it's the craziest thing, but people don't get it until they actually go through it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the way we learn as humans, right? We're experiential learners. So we have to get into something, right? We can read all about it, listen to all the podcasts, but we have to experience it. And the way typical humans adapt, we contemplate about things. There's that pre-contemplation. And then we kind of, it's a journey. And then we reach a point where we get on board, we start trying it. And that's where we really want to surround ourselves with people that support what we're doing, and especially in any type of wellness change, because that I'd say 4 to 6 week window, that's when you're going to fall off the wagon again. And it really helps when you have that support community around you. And after about 6 weeks, you start to kind of ramp up more into that lifestyle. And I'd say after about 6 months, if someone's, regardless of the change, if they're going plant-based or they're starting to work out a few times a week, after 6 months, it's kind of an ingrained habit.
It's funny because when you said you're starting to date veganism, I just thought you were going to say, I'm starting to eat dates. And, like that's what's fueling me. So
I experimented with plant-based probably about 4 or 5 years ago when I was racing as a triathlete, and I was racing at the ITU level, going off to the Worlds, and I think I lasted about 3 or 4 months, and my energy level just completely dropped, and it was just something that I wasn't getting the right food in at the right time. And I think I mentioned to Adam about the protein. I wasn't getting my protein in. So this time around, I really incorporated more beans, legumes, and all that sort of stuff. And it's really kind of sustained me more. I haven't had those drops in energy like I did before. So I'm doing something different now. I don't know really what, because I'm not tracking it, but it's working this time.
But it's cool because everybody's so different. And when you find the right recipe for yourself, then you just know, and it's magical, right? And everybody's so different. That's why it's not good to just give someone the exact same training plan, the exact same nutrition plan. You really need to cater it to their specific needs, and it's a bit of an experiment, and you play as you go, and it's trial and error. And when you finally figure that out, it's beautiful.
I don't think any of the athletes that you coach have the same diet plan as you.
No, none of them. They're all different.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the first question they say is, Adam, what do you eat? Because I want to do the same thing that you're doing. And it's that's the wrong way to look at it, right? Because everybody's got their own thing.
Yeah, it's trial and error, and the important thing is to be able to have that connection with the mind and the body. Say, okay, this is how I'm going to eat. This is how did it feel eating the meal? How does it feel after working out? And then the more in tune you are with your body, the better off you're going to be, and the faster you're going to be able to make those changes.
So talk about being in tune. Lately, I've found that some of the people who are least in tune with their body are people who are in the corporate world. And there's a lot of self-abuse, late nights, not a lot of mindfulness, a lot of bad food, lots of alcohol. And the corporate world can be doing so much better if employees, or maybe the corporations were taking better care of the employees, or if they were taking care of themselves.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, because my background is in corporate training development and also high performance athletics, and I've kind of mirrored the two. And one thing I learned over my career as an athlete, we take things for granted. We probably learned them, Adam, I remember you mentioned you played hockey as a child. We learned a lot of performance skills way back then that we can use in the modern day workplace now. One of the things is around awareness and training. But I'd say over the past couple of years, a lot of my work has shifted more from, performance management, looking at, performance reviews, how do we, set criteria for different levels, to looking at workplace wellness in the sense of change management. So how do we enable people to go through a big change in the workplace in a sound and healthy and productive way? Because at the end of the day, my clients always want to see some type of return on their investment. So what I'm starting to see now is a trend towards, okay, these health and wellness skills and habits that we've taken for granted over our lifetimes now come into the workplace. So give you an example. I was working with a client a month ago. They just found out that their organization was being taken over. And it's, a mid-sized company. And, majority of people at every level in the organization didn't know where their job was going to be in like 2 weeks. So right away, I'm pulled in there to talk about change and how we handle change, but also how do we handle change in the moment? So you get your notice, you're going to be, terminated in a week. That's when you want to have those skills of being mindful of just your breath and being able to be very focused and calm, to be able to ride the change. Because when you go through any type of change, right, it's a journey, but the corporate world now is starting to see, there is value in being attuned to your breath. Definitely, I see more value being shone upon just eating well. So I can walk into a cafeteria in any organization and they have vegan options. I didn't see that, say, 3 years ago. It was your standard cafeteria food, but now we start to see more and more options from a diet standpoint. And I touch upon that with my clients, but the majority of my work really focuses around getting the optimal performance out of people. And for decades, we always thought high-low performers in the workplace were these people that got by in very little sleep, ate poorly, and that was a small percentage. But what we found over the decades, this has started to take a toll on people's psyche, believe it or not. That's where we've started to see it. And there's been a real push now around mental health awareness in the workplace, which is closely tied into workplace performance. And Bell Canada here in Canada has been a real corporate leader in just getting the conversation started. And that's the starting point. And from a health and wellness standpoint, before we can get people to change habits, we have to create communication and we have to create dialogue, and a healthy dialogue, not polarization like I'm better than you, right or wrong, but just understanding what's going on. And the reason, the corporations are starting to take a look at this big challenge in the workplace, it's because there's a lot more people going on short-term and long-term disabilities, starting to dig down, understanding, there is a small percentage out there in the population that can get by on umpteen number of hours of sleep, 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, but the vast majority of us can't. The vast majority of us need a chance to unplug and turn off our mobile devices. Again, that has allowed work to creep into our personal life. So, we might leave work with great intentions to sit down, have a healthy dinner with the family, but it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock rolls around, you're still on your phone, you're still working, you've missed that window of opportunity to go work out, you've missed that window of opportunity to cook a healthy meal. So it's really kind of working with my clients, giving them some strong performance skills that they can use day in and day out, but also allowing them to create more structure around what a healthy workplace looks like. And if we go overseas, over into France, I believe it was in the spring now, they've got laws around when you can send emails and when you can't send emails. So I think companies now, after 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, they're not allowed to send workplace emails anymore.
And they're not allowed on the weekends either.
Yeah, there's some companies that actually shut down servers on the weekend, so all your mobile devices are deactivated. Your email, everything's deactivated. When you go on holidays, they'll basically pull all your electronic plugs because you're getting that holiday time in, and you're really getting it in, as opposed to being somewhere in a nice destination but you're still on your phone. So workplace wellness has really morphed into a lot of different things. So I get called upon to do a lot of different workshops. A lot of them are based on some foundational principles around health and wellness when it comes to exercise and eating, but also more around mindset and how we can control the mind and keeping the mind engaged in the work that we're doing and building the strong relationships within the workplace.
Do you find that there's a bigger amount of people who are having mental health issues as opposed to physical issues?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the numbers are just starting to reveal themselves. I'd say the mental health issues are kind of things that have been there but haven't been talked about. So it's hard to say now where people are having the challenges. And I've seen the numbers related to employees taking long-term and short-term disability, and it's greatly associated with mental health challenges. I look at them two different ways. There's mental health challenges. It could be burnout. It can be, just run down. Maybe you've gone through a big change at work and you just, you're so exhausted, you haven't been able to cope with it. And then on the other hand, there's what I call mental injury. So these are people that maybe have worked for, 10, 20 years in a very highly stressed, highly competitive environment, and they're just so almost traumatized from the event. A, they have to deal with that in a different way, and B, it's going to take them a longer time to recover. So I'm not a psychologist. I don't diagnose people, but what I do, I give my clients the ability to recognize signs in their coworkers. And in the workplace, the best thing we can do is kind of have each other's back, recognize signs of somebody that might be going through a mental health challenge, and also offer an empathetic ear. And just those two things alone will help remove the stigma, because again, I'd say that's the biggest thing when it comes to health and wellness around mental health, is the stigma that we're really trying to break through.
So I think part of the problem is that we live in this fast-paced world. We're looking for that instant gratification. The people at the top of the food chain in these corporations expect that out of their employees. They're always pushing. And as an employee, you don't want to let them down. You want to keep your job. You got to keep going. You got to be always on. And so to me, it sets like this vicious circle where as soon as I pull my plug and disassociate even for a few minutes and I lose that track that's going around that circle in my mind, I might lose my job. So I'm not going to be able to perform at my peak if I'm trying to keep up with what my employer, what the corporation needs me to do. So how do people that are in that kind of situation or feel that way, how are corporations actually expecting them to deal with it when they're not taking their wellness into effect?
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, because when I go in and work with a leadership team, one of the things we look at is, is it a reactive culture or is it a responsive culture? So, and that's a shift that's starting to happen now. And to be responsive, you can't be on that fight or flight cycle of being reactive all the time. So it is coming from the top down. As I mentioned to you, Bell Canada has taken big steps over the last few years to really address those issues, because it is a competitive marketplace. There's no doubt about that. Back in 2008 and 2009, I often say to my clients, we thought that was a recession, but that was a fundamental change in the way we did business. The rate of change accelerated. The global marketplace really came through. And regardless of the product or service area you're in, it is a competitive market space, because products are very much similar from product A, product B, right? iPhones versus Androids, right? They service basically the same needs. Where companies are recognizing now their competitive advantages within their people, and they're also recognizing that they can't burn people out, because that's their talent. That's what's going to make them innovative. That's what's going to keep them ahead of their competitors. So it's a shift from just, putting in, 50, 60 hours to saying, okay, what are we going to do with that window of 40 hours, 50 hours? Flip side is, I often say to my clients, if your goal is to climb, the corporate ladder, forget about life-work balance. Right? Forget about it completely, because you're not doing a 40-hour week. And again, those are the things that we sacrifice. So instead of getting them all stressed out about having, work-life balance, which is a bit of a fleeting journey, I often get them to think of, work-life blending, and ensure that, if that's the goal that you're after, make sure you've got the family support, understanding, your kids are going to realize, you're not home every night for dinner because you're doing this at work. So again, the workplace is much more dynamic than it ever used to be. And a lot of that has to do with the rapid pace of change. So leaders are finally not I wouldn't say slowing down, but again, becoming more aware of, we can't keep up with all the changes. Where are we going to focus our time and energy and move forward from there?
And as you said, Bell Let's Talk is doing some great things. And I think back in episode 6, we talked about mental health. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, when I talked about my whole story with mental health, and we talked about the Bell Let's Talk Day. But how is the stigma now? Are people still hiding it? Are people still afraid to come out and say, I'm having issues, I can't deal with this mentally, I suffer from PTSD, whatever it is? How protected are they really in the workplace right now? Because I know when I was in the workplace, I didn't feel protected at all to be able to come out and talk about it. In fact, I did one day, and a colleague said to me, Shoshana, don't talk about that, because if the principal finds out, then you'll be let go for sure at the end of the year, because she sees it as a sign of weakness.
Yeah, and that's interesting that analogy, because that's the stigma right there, right? You can't say anything because it's going to show that you're weak. But the flip side is, you're speaking up because you're actually strong. You've got that self-awareness to say, hey, no, I've pushed myself to the maximum. And it's interesting. I mean, again, given the clients I've worked with and the organizations I've gone into, I'd say it's remarkable how the stigma is coming down year after year. And I've noticed it probably over the last 2 years, where it's really accelerated a lot. And again, it's people like myself going into these organizations and talking about workplace performance, and talking about the link between mental health and workplace performance, because you can't have one without the other, right? And that's the big challenge. And even when I'm working, I do a lot of training with up and coming leaders, so a lot of leadership succession training in organizations. I teach these leaders to be in tune with themselves, to be present, to show empathy. And these are leadership skills that, I'd say even 5 years ago, we weren't teaching, future leaders in organizations to be, but it's having that ability to, lead somebody, be present when we're having a conversation, and be empathetic to the needs of the people. That doesn't necessarily mean that, leaders are going to make decisions everyone's going to be happy with. That would just never work, right? That's not reality, but it's the way they approach leadership and addressing issues like that. So, and there's a lot of great employee and family assistant programs out there that companies subscribe to. So, people that work for companies can go, and it's completely anonymous, call someone up on a toll-free number, could be a psychotherapist or a social worker. You can have sessions, via the phone, set, face-to-face sessions up, depending your challenges and your struggles, or, give someone a package so they can get started. Maybe it's more of a preventative that they want to do. They want to make themselves mentally strong because they know they're going to go through a challenging phase in their life, whether it's at work or outside of work. But the conversation is definitely happening more and more.
So, Paul, you're doing these workplace wellness programs for corporations, and Shoshana, you just came back from doing a wellness retreat for a big corporation. And my question, I guess, to both of you is that it's clear that these corporations that the two of you just are working with, their leaders want this for their employees. There are so many corporations out there that their leadership doesn't have the vision to bring in people like you guys to help support their employees to bring them to their optimal performance. But a lot of those corporations have employees that do see that vision, but can't just go out and grab the two of you to come to their corporation. So what could we say to an employee that's out there who doesn't necessarily have a leader in their corporation with that vision to either help their colleagues raise their level of performance, or is there a way for that employee to actually get their leadership team to get you guys on board?
Yeah, that's, again, I see it more and more in the workplace that there are doors opening up. Again, depending on the workplace and the company, I'd say vast majority of larger organizations do have support systems in place. They're completely anonymous, and they're usually accessed through their HR department. If I look at some of the big banks here in Toronto, they all have that support in place for their employees. Again, the leadership is definitely changing. Again, from awareness, communication, but also mid-level frontline managers, they're becoming more aware. And again, it's not a case of weakness, but it's a case of just having the conversation and understanding, if somebody's going through a challenge, it can be outside of work even. Yeah, it's going to impact their performance at work. And how do you have those conversations, right? And opening up the door in a healthy and constructive way.
So in my experience, the CEO wanted to be able to gift her other CEOs, because it's not for profit that's across Canada. So basically what she did was she pulled all her CEOs from across Canada together in one spot for their yearly meeting, and they took 5 hours out of their day to work with me on wellness from a personal and professional point of view. And it was her way of gifting them with wellness, with insight, with information, giving them little nuggets so that they can apply it to their own lives, apply it to their daily workday, and bring it back to their teams as well. And the other thing is they have a really big goal coming up. They have a really big agenda, and she wanted to make sure that they are resilient as possible, that they're not going to crumble under pressure, that they're going to be able to find that work-life blend or work-life balance, that they're going to have little skills throughout the day that are going to keep their blood pressure below a certain level. And for her, it was just very proactive, which I thought was great. And, anybody who's listening who's like, wow, we can really use something like what Paul and I are talking about today, because I think we're coming at it from two different perspectives. And I think I'm a little more woo and you're a little more business oriented, but everybody has somebody who they talk to. Everybody has somebody, a superior. Everybody has team meetings, and bringing these things up in team meetings and really looking far down the line, which I think a lot of business people do, looking far down the line of what are we going to get out of this, right? What's our return going to be? And if the return is employees who are working better, who are happier at work, who have skills, who aren't taking panic afternoons off, I have to go see the doctor because I'm having a panic attack. There's so much more for the business. And I know even from a health point of view, in terms of what people eat, there's been a lot of business employees who have come to me and said, I have my labs coming up for my insurance. And the businesses want people to do better on their labs because it costs everybody less money if they're healthier. And, 21 days on a plant-based diet and then sticking to it long-term or sticking to most of it long-term can bring down your cholesterol in terms of almost 33 points in some people's cases. So if we can make those health goals, if we could make those mental health changes in such a short period of time, but have it keep giving, then I think everybody wins.
Yes, and it's interesting. You talked about the insurance and the lab results. Usually, a senior leadership team, those are the things that they take notice of, right? It really does come down to what are some measurable metrics that we can report on. So, is it decreased use of insurance claims? The big thing in my space is short-term and long-term disability. That's where we really see the numbers increase, but also employee disengagement. So, there's a big industry-wide study a few years ago about employee engagement at work. And, the vast majority of people who are coming to work are disengaged. And a lot of that has to do with, falls into the camp of health and wellness, both physical and mental. And these are the numbers that we start to look at. Mental health challenges now cost the Canadian economy upwards to about $55 billion a year. So these are some staggering numbers. But like I said to a lot of people in my workshops, it's like, let's not get caught up in the numbers and this and that, but let's look at what we can do. Again, first thing around mental health and being a high level performers, what's in our circle of control that we can start doing now, today? And, I can be more of a supportive colleague for a friend of mine that's going through a challenge. I can learn more about being present and being more mentally strong. So I can learn a lot on my own, especially given, all the resources out there we can find on our own, and start to build more of that resiliency skill within ourselves. But it's one thing I always say to people, like, get to know your colleagues beyond their job title, their name, and their duties. Get to know them as people. And even if you can do that, you're fostering a more productive environment, a more healthy environment, and you've got a team in place now that when somebody does go through a challenge, they've got support there.
What are some of the myths in the workplace wellness programs?
Some of the myths. Things change overnight. I think that's a cultural myth, right? We were talking earlier about becoming plant-based, right? You're not going to see a change overnight, but it's over time that you'll slowly start to see the numbers come down. Whether we look at people going on long-term disability, whether we look at costs of mental health to the the Canadian economy, it's the myth that we didn't get here overnight. It's going to take us a while to kind of balance ourselves out, even ourselves out, and again, it's blowing away that myth of being 100% competitive 100% of the time is the way we're going to beat our competitors, and just like in sport, that doesn't work, right?
Or I don't have time to take part in these activities because I just need to do my work.
It's stuff. Yeah, those always. Those excuses, right?
But I love these programs because I know when I go through them, I'm really excited for it, and the people that I'm with are there that day, and we're excited to go through these programs. We do all these exercises, and then the day's over, and then it's back to real life. And most people don't carry what they learned in that one-day workshop or in that 2-hour workshop, whatever it might be, into their workday. Are there any little things that people can actually grab and apply? Or are we talking about big things that actually take time to apply to their work life? Like, is there a cheat sheet kind of thing that we could do?
I always give my clients skills, practical skills that they can start applying, A, with themselves, and then B with their team. So, we started this podcast off around gratitude, right? So one of the exercises I do, whether I'm doing leadership succession training or getting people ready to handle a big change at work, is get them to journal, pen and paper, old school, and write down every night 3 things that you're grateful for, or a couple of things that that you accomplished, some small goal, and you do that. And believe it or not, over a short period as a week, you'll start to feel better. You'll start to feel more energized. You'll have completely different perspective on when challenges come across your way in the workplace and how to handle them. But to your point, it's taking the knowledge and applying it. We don't live in a day and age anymore where, that notion of wisdom is power. Wisdom is only potential power. It's when we start acting on it that it actually starts to take traction, and people kind of have those aha moments. So, you mentioned you've gone through, those half day or full day workshops. When I'm putting together packages for my clients, I'll do the workshops, but I'll also follow up to maybe a dozen coaching sessions. And if I'm working with a leader directly, they're one-on-one coaching sessions. Maybe I'm working with a leadership team, management team. I'll come back and we'll have coaching sessions. Just say, okay, this is what we learned in the classroom. How is it being applied? What has been, your experience using these skills? What do we have to optimize and move forward from there? Because a lot of times I'll roll a program out. We'll do it with the leadership team, and then they'll see the value, and then okay, let's bring our managers on board, and then our frontline workers.
I think the follow-up is super important, and a lot of the programs I've been to, I've seen, they don't have that follow-up to really reinforce all the important information and exercises and things that you do during those workshops. So that's huge value. And the journaling, I know from experience, is definitely a very beneficial tool. And for anybody listening who hasn't journaled before or doesn't journal regularly, give it a try. Even if it's one thing a night, write it down, be grateful for something, and you'll see. Paul's right. It's going to make a difference within even a week.
It's amazing because it's a simple exercise, yet the return from it is so powerful. It's unbelievable. So.
It doesn't need to be hours and hours of journaling. You don't need to pour your heart into the book. You don't have to worry about anybody opening it up and figuring out all your deepest, darkest secrets. But what we've said before so many times is that if you're frustrated, if you're angry, if you're sad, when you're giving thanks, when you're being grateful, when you're recognizing the good, then it's really hard to feel those other emotions at the same time. And one of the pieces of feedback that I got while doing a gratitude exercise last week with the group that I was working with is just that it was like a big calm came over them. It's like somebody dumped a bucket of calm on them, and it started from their head and went down to their toes, and they're like, oh, I'm totally feeling more creative now. I'm feeling like I can go get my work done now. Yeah. All of these feelings that I had, like keeping me at point, like I could relax my shoulders. And it was really interesting to see how physically they changed as well, which they couldn't necessarily notice themselves, but they actually did as a group.
Interesting. Yeah, it's amazing. Again, us being in this space, we take all those things for granted, but it's also we're the agents of change. And when I got in corporate training development, that's one thing I was told. We're the agents of change, and we battle sometimes, some of the stuff that's been laid out before us and decades before us. But again, simple things as journaling. A lot of times my clients ask me to come on board just to consult, to really sift through, the positive psychology that's more motivational in nature as opposed to the stuff that's really going to take traction and change a team. And they're amazed when those simple things, like we talk about journaling, are the skills and tools that they should be using day in and day out. It's nothing grand or grandiose. I learned, it's interesting, I learned from one of my mentors, we hear, the notion, is the glass half full or half empty? And, it doesn't matter. You can be having a bad day and it's half empty. Who cares, right? It's not a judgment. But he said to me, Paul, it doesn't matter if it's half full or half empty. If you like what's in it, keep filling it up. If you don't like what's in it, dump it out and start over again. He had no time for all these little philosophical analogies. He was so pragmatic, and it showed in the results that he was able to get from his clients.
So talking about results, what results have the CEOs or the big bosses reported back to you? What results have you gotten them in their business, in their workplace?
We have, so give you an example. Anytime I do a workshop, we do what we call an evaluation survey right after, and we're measuring, whether the audience found the content useful, was it on target, and is it going to be actionable? Where we have to start tracking, and this is more longitudinal, is seeing the change at a 3-year mark, 5-year mark, 7-year mark of are those numbers going down around employee engagement? Are we seeing engagement levels going up? Are we seeing short-term and long-term disability going down? Are we seeing our quality of work improving? And that could be around anything. But we live in a human capital marketplace. Like I said, our products are very much the same. It's really coming down to the talent, in-house talent, nurturing them and getting them to grow. And I'm a big believer, everyone's a high performer, whether somebody wants to do the same job day in and day out, 9 to 5, work 40 hours a week, but they want to become super good. They're just as much of a high performer as somebody that wants to climb a corporate ladder. Yeah, put in maybe those long hours, but that's their performance journey. So it's really looking at human performance as opposed to, okay, here's our hypos, our high potential performers in the workplace. Let's focus all our time and energy on them, and then forget about, the rest of the 99% of the population in the workplace.
I also found that the group left just a little bit tighter because of some of the activities that I was doing with them around fitness, around movement, more than fitness actually. And it was so interesting to see how they were laughing together and how they were creating bigger bonds and creating memories and creating stories so that when they are stuck in these meetings where everybody's frowning and nobody knows what to do and everybody's losing their hair, they have these memories also to go back on and remember that wacky thing that we did at this time, or let's go do it now because of how happy we felt at that time. I really did feel like there was a big bonding happening in the room at the same time.
And that's great. That's what I was saying earlier about creating relationships, right? Getting to know people beyond their job title and duty and getting them, humanizing them, essentially. That's what you did, right? You kind of broke down the walls for them so they can make those more authentic bonds.
Yeah, and there was no structure to their positions. There was no titles.
Yeah.
They were just people.
Yeah.
And that was great.
Yeah.
What strategies do you suggest for people if they wanted some actionable tips to start today to create their best workday?
Focus on what you're doing outside of work. And again, this kind of goes back into, how we started this conversation off is how are you looking after yourself physically? What are you putting in your body? What are you eating? But what are you watching at night, right? I had a client that was a news junkie, and I was working with him on creating more time in his day. And we started to carve back the time he was spending on, useless media. And what he found, he got some, a couple more hours back in his day, but his energy levels went up because he wasn't consuming all this sensational news. So it comes back to having a strong operating system from a health and wellness standpoint. And every high level performer that I've met who's been happy, engaged, great life at work and outside work, they all have that in common. They look after themselves from a health and wellness standpoint. So again, you want to create your best day. What are you doing outside of work? Because that's what's going to prepare you for all those hard challenges at work, whether it's corporate downsizing, whether it's, taking, your team in a completely different direction. It's having that, physical and mental stamina. And we only develop that through, proper eating, proper exercise, and having more of that holistic lifestyle.
And if they do need a jump start in the middle of their day, what do you recommend for that?
Sometimes it's as simple as getting up and walking around for 10 minutes. And if you can get outside, great. Because what happens when we're sitting for long periods of time, you probably realize this, our brains start to shut down. It's almost like your computer going into hibernate mode because we're not designed to sit for 8 hours a day. So yeah, get up, walk around, breathe. I could be working with, what's that? It's interesting. I work with these, these high level potentials in organizations, and the skill that I teach them is just before you go into a high pressure meeting, presentation, sales pitch, take 5 deep breaths and just focus. So it's literally taking what I've learned from the yoga mat and bringing it right to the boardroom door. And that, again, a simple little strategy like that pays dividends. So they walk into that meeting, they're calm, cool, collective, and focused.
So important. And I love that you said that the best way to fix your workday is to do it off work hours. And I think that basically, I get up really early these days. I'm getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock some mornings to go run. And I'm doing that because I find that after I run, I just feel amazing. I feel ready for the workday, and it's preparing my mind. I'm getting good oxygen in, I'm exercising, I'm moving, and it really lets me focus on what I need to do at work while I'm at work. it's just a great setup for my day. And then following up with great food, eating really well, my high performance vehicle that I talk about all the time, which is my body, is able to perform at a peak level. And that's what I think everybody's after. And I think that's what you're out there trying to teach these corporations how to do. And it's such an admirable job that you've taken on. And it's an amazing thing that you're doing for these corporations. So thank you for doing that. Continue to do that. And of course, before we let you go, why don't you tell us where people can find you?
Oh, best place to find me is at actusperformance.com. That's my website. You can read more about my background and the services I provide. You can also find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Believe it or not, that is my social media platform given my corporate world. That's where you can find all my articles that I published and reach out to me there as well.
All right, that makes perfect sense. So we'll link to all that in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on our show tonight. We really appreciate you hanging out with us because this has been just a lot of great information that I think a lot of people are going to benefit from.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure that most of our listeners are in corporate themselves. And if they're not, they know somebody who is. So sharing this podcast with somebody who they know can benefit from it, I think would be a really nice gift for the day.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Great discussion. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast listening platforms. We appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it ensures other people will find us too. Thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference. Connect and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Plant Trainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at www.planttrainers.com for awesome plant-based recipes and a list of our services. Email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so we can answer them on our upcoming Facebook Lives. We hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day.